The Grimm brothers. The brothers Grimm. Today I'm reading the story of Little Briar Rose. A long time ago there was a king and queen who said... Sorry, my brain sometimes. A long time ago there were a king and a queen who said every day, "Ah, if only we had a child." But they never had one. But it happened that once when the queen was bathing, a frog crept out of the water onto the land and said to her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has gone by, you shall have a daughter." What the frog had said had come true. It's kind of weird there was a frog, but okay. And the queen had a little girl who was so pretty that the king could not contain himself for joy and ordered a great feast. He invited not only his kindred, friends, and acquaintances, but also the wise women, in order that they might be kind and well disposed towards the child. There were 13 of them in his kingdom, but as he had only 12 golden plates for them to eat out of, one of them had to be left at home. The feast was held with all manner of splendor, and when it came to an end, the wise women bestowed their magical gifts upon the baby. One gave virtue, another beauty, a third riches, and so on, with everything in the world that one could wish for. When 11 of them had made their promises, suddenly the 13th came in. She wished to avenge herself for not having been invited, and without greeting or looking at anyone, she cried with a loud voice, The king's daughter shall in her 15th year prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead." Bit harsh. And without saying a word more, she turned around and left the room. They were all shocked, but the 12th, whose good wish still remained unspoken, came forward, and as she could not undo the evil sentence, but only soften it, she said, "It shall not be death, but a deep sleep of 100 years, into which the princess shall fall. The king, who would fain keep his dear children from the misfortune, gave orders that every spindle in the whole kingdom should be burnt. Meanwhile, the gifts of the wise women were plenteously filled on the young woman, for she was so beautiful, modest, good-natured, and wise, that anyone who saw her was bound to love her. It happened on that very day, when she was 15 years old. The king and queen were not at home, and the maiden was left in the palace quite alone. So she went around into all sorts of places, looked into rooms and bedchambers just as she liked, and last came to an old tower. She climbed up the narrow winding staircase and reached a little door. A rusty key was in the lock, and when she turned it, the door sprang open. And there in a little room sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning her flax. Good day, old mother," said the king's daughter. "What are you doing there?" "I am spinning," said the old woman, and nodded her head. "What sort of thing is that rattles around so merrily?" said the girl. And she took the spindle and wanted to spin it too. But scarcely had she touched the spindle when the magic decree was fulfilled, and she pricked her finger with it. In that very moment when she felt the prick, she fell down upon the bed that stood there, and laid in deep sleep. And this sleep extended all over the palace. The king and queen, who had just come home and had entered the great hall, began to go to sleep, and the whole of the court with them. The horses too went to sleep in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons upon the roof, and the flies on the wall. Even the fire that was flaming on the hearth became quiet and slept. The roast meat left off frizzling, and the cook, who was just going to pull the hair out of the scullery boy because he had forgotten something, let him go and went to sleep. Nice timing for that boy, huh? And the wind fell, and the trees before the castle, not a leaf moved again. Got a pretty picture here, actually. But round the castle there began to grow a hedge of thorns, not horns, thorns. What would a hedge of horns look like? I don't know. I think I'd be more scared of a hedge of horns rather than thorns. I mean, the horns had to be attached to something, right? Maybe heads. I don't know. Oh, that's my ADHD activated. Okay. Which every year became higher. I'll start the sentence again. But round about the castle there began to grow a hedge of thorns, which every year became higher, and at last grew close up round the castle and all over it, so there was nothing of it to be seen, not even the flag upon the roof. But the story of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose, for so the princess was named, went about the country, so that from time to time kings' sons came and tried to get through the thorny hedge into the castle. But they found it impossible, for the thorns held fast together as if they had hands, and the youths were caught in them, could not get loose again, and died a miserable death. You'd think that would be the deterrent, but no. After long, long years, a king's son came again to the country, and heard an old man talking about the thorn hedge, and what a beautiful castle was said to stand behind it, in which a wonderfully beautiful princess named Briar Rose had been asleep for 100 years, and the king and the queen and the whole court were asleep likewise. He had heard it too from his grandfather, that many kings' sons had already come and had tried to get through the thorny hedge, but they had remained sticking fast in it, and died a pitiful death. Why does that keep happening? Then the youth said, "I'm not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful Briar Rose." That's probably what every dude was thinking, honestly. The good old man might dissuade him as he would, but he did not listen to his words. I'm tired. But by this time the 100 years had just passed, and the day had come when Briar Rose was to awaken again. When the king's son came near the thorn hedge, it was nothing but large and beautiful flowers, which parted from each other of their own accord, and had let him pass unhurt. Then they closed again behind him like a hedge. In the castle yard he saw the horses and the spotted hounds lying asleep. On the roof sat the pigeons with their heads under their wings, and when he entered the house the flies were asleep upon the wall. The cook in the kitchen was still holding his hand out to seize the boy, and the maid was sitting by the black hen which she was going to pluck. He went on further, and in the great hall he saw the whole of the court lying asleep, and up by the throne lay the king and the queen. Then he went on a bit further, and all was so quiet that a breath could be heard, and at last he came to the tower and opened the door into the little room where Briar Rose was sleeping. There she lay, so beautiful he could not turn his eyes away, and he stooped down and gave her a kiss. But as soon as he kissed her, Briar Rose opened her eyes and awoke, and looked at him quite sweetly. Then they went down together, and the king awoke, and the queen and the whole court, and looked at each other in great astonishment. The horses in the courtyard stood up and shook themselves, and you'd think everyone would be covered by dust by now, right? It'd be like anyone with asthma would have just died. The hounds jumped up and wagged their tails, and the pigeons upon the roof pulled out their heads from under the wings, looked around, and flew into the open country. The flies on the wall crept again, the fire in the kitchen burned up and flickered and cooked the meat. The joint began to turn and sizzle again, and the cook gave the boy such a box on the ear that he screamed, and the maid finished plucking the fowl. That joint, I think it might be like a, And then the marriage of the king's son with Briar Rose was celebrated with all splendor, And they lived content to the end, and they lived contented to the end of their days. The end. It's a much nicer story than the original. I like the German version better by the sounds of it.